you. Appreciate the opportunity to spend just a few minutes with you this afternoon. I want to give you a quick snapshot of who I am and where I've come from and a little bit of my background. I also would like to recognize my wife, Rebecca, that's here with me this afternoon. It's not every time that I get an opportunity to address a crowd that she's here with me. And as somebody that's involved in public life, there's no question that having a wife and having a family that's very, very supportive is critical to ultimately the public official's success. I was born right here in Washington County, raised in Hillsborough, attended Hillsborough High School, went on to Portland State University for an undergraduate degree. I have been involved in politics kind of from a young age, having a campaign for my father when he was running for school board, maybe when I was 5 and 6 years old. The opportunity to engage and be part of our community is something that is really, really important to me, and I've really enjoyed that part of my life. You look at, in addition to the public service side, having the opportunity to own and operate a small business. I've got a small construction business background. I own and operate a company for about 12 years. I transitioned out of the construction side into a consultant role, consulting company for the last several years. Owning and operating a small business in this state is at times very challenging, and I think that it's important that we have legislators, that we elect people to the legislature that understands what it means to own and operate a business, what it means to navigate the challenges that small businessmen and women face in this state. As we look at our current situation that's facing our state, there's no question that a lot of our friends and neighbors and family members are hurting. A lot of folks in Oregon are out of work. They've been out of work for a very long time, and if I ask every one of us to raise our hand, I bet we either have a family member or a close friend or a neighbor that is currently unemployed, or a friend or a neighbor or a close family member perhaps that has had significant economic challenges. The reality is that all the economists agree that the recession will end. And the question, in fact, some have said, well, it's already ended. I would suggest that if you are a person that's out of work, it hasn't ended for you. The reality is though that the legislature ought to do things, ought to pass bills, ought to take actions that support private sector job creation and support the small businessmen and women in our state that are responsible really for the creation and the sustaining of the vast majority of employment in our state. If you look at, I think, a premier piece of legislation that was passed in the 2009 session, and it's one that I had my hand in significant form and fashion. It's the transportation bill that was passed, the Jobs and Transportation Act. That particular piece of legislation passed the House and the Senate with wide bipartisan support. It's a product of significant and intense negotiation, bipartisan, Democrats and Republicans involved. Both members of the House and the Senate were involved in that process. I think that the other point that's important is that we included the stakeholders, the folks that are most directly impacted by both the investments and the taxes that are part of that. We included them all in that process. And as you look just outside of, if you could see outside of this building, you could see some of that work being done right now as a direct result of that piece of legislation, the Jobs and Transportation Act, that transportation package. The widening of Highway 26 is real private sector jobs being created, being sustained here in Washington County. Obviously, there's transportation projects that are occurring all over the state, but those are thousands of men and women that are working today in the private sector that otherwise, without the work of the legislature and the work that I had my hand in, wouldn't be happening. You know, as a member of the Oregon Senate, I've had the challenge, quite honestly, of being in the minority and having to work across the aisle to get things done. And I, quite honestly, have a record of accomplishment when you look at my legislative record. And I don't have the luxury of being in the majority, I would say. And you know, that's those are challenging things that you have to identify projects and issues and bills that you can generate bipartisan support for. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of those that we were successful in passing last session. One of them was Senate Bill 911 that had to do with the Psychiatric Review Board and how they send individuals back to our community centers. And there was a situation in Cornelius where one of these homes was set up where very dangerous and violent individuals were sent to Cornelius, and this home was called the Connell House, without any notification of local law enforcement, without any notification of the sheriff's office of what kind of individuals were coming in. And we passed this bill, Senate Bill 911, strong bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. The governor signed the bill to require that communication, that coordination between the state and these local government folks, and local law enforcement, so that neighbors would be informed and would be aware, and the law enforcement ahead of time would know what kind of individuals were coming to our community. Important piece of legislation. In addition to that, in 2009, we had this horrendous murder that occurred here in Washington County, where Heather Snively was brutally murdered. Her baby was cut out of her belly, and both the baby and Heather Snively were killed. And unfortunately, the district attorney here in Washington County couldn't charge for 2 murders in that situation. Could only charge for 1. And I thought that wasn't the appropriate route. And so I quickly drafted legislation to allow the district attorney to prosecute for 2 murders. Well, that quickly got all wrapped up in abortion politics. And so we took another tact, and basically we were able to pass, again, in a bipartisan fashion, and I worked closely with Representative Jeff Barker in the House to basically create an aggravated murder statute for the murder or assault of a pregnant woman. It's another approach to basically elevate crimes against pregnant women. If you look at that case, it's working its way through the courts now, and the district attorney has found a way. This law that we passed won't impact the case that is underway right now, but the district attorney has found a way to charge for aggravated murder in spite of our statutes. But that, again, it demonstrates the ability to address a real need, find solutions, find bipartisan support, and move important legislation through the process. I would suggest that today that there's a huge problem that we have in the state. The problem is one where the impression is that Oregon is unfriendly to business. And you can argue whether that's true or not. You can have your statistics and I can have my statistics, but you look at the reality on the road when you talk to businessmen and women in this state, there's this impression and that Oregon is unfriendly to business. And you look at the multi-million-dollar campaign that was waged both for and against Measure 66 and 67. And basically that campaign was a huge advertisement, in my opinion, of that Oregon is unfriendly to business. And we have stories after stories of businesses that have left Oregon or downsized their operations here because of the tax situation. I would suggest if we're going to create private sector jobs in this state that we need to do a few things. One, we need to reduce the capital gains tax, and so that entrepreneurs and innovators and risk takers see Oregon as a favorable place to invest rather than as one that is going to penalize them significantly if they invest here. Our states around us don't have the kind of huge capital gains taxes that we have in this state. If you're in the higher income brackets in Oregon, and those are where the folks that are basically the investor class is, they're going to pay on their capital gains the same amount that they're going to pay on their personal income tax, say an 11% if they're at the top. That makes no sense, and we ought to address that issue. In addition to that, when you have a corporate minimum tax that taxes businesses based not on their profits but on how much money comes in the door, again, that doesn't make a lot of sense, and I think we need to address that. And that's an important piece of the impression is unfriendly to business. Again, job creation is important, and if we want to support the important things that state government does budget-wise, you can't do that unless you have a healthy private sector. And I would suggest that today we don't. But we can in the future if we go to Salem, make the necessary changes, and address these issues that Oregon is once again friendly and open for business for entrepreneurs, innovators, and those that are in our community that want to take risks. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. Look forward to the questions. Thank you.